Hey everyone, thanks again for joining us. We are doing another live Q&A here today for Chronicles of Elyria. My name is Jeremy Caspian Walsh. I go by Caspian on the forums, and I am the owner and creative director of Soulbound Studios, working on Chronicles of Elyria. And I'm being joined today by two of my esteemed colleagues. Over here on my right, I have Vi Alexander. Vi is the executive producer of Chronicles of Elyria here at Soulbound Studios. And on my left, I have Miguel Sozo Sierra, who is our technical designer and world builder on Chronicles of Elyria. We're going to be taking questions from our forums and answering them as best we can to help you guys get more information on the tribes that we've been talking about on and off over the last couple of weeks. New skill tends to be skills that people train up to the point of expert or artisan. Beyond that, once you start getting into the master and grandmaster and things like that, they're much more advanced stages. So the Naren have a 20% increase right now up until the expert level. We may play that up to the artisan, we may take that back one more, but beyond that they lose the 20% bonus, because at that point it's not about becoming like masters of all, it's more about like specializing in a specific thing. And while the Naren are really good across a lot of skills, we didn't see them necessarily as being specialists. That's more like the Rothi or the Broodveer, or one of the other tribes who generally focus more on specializing in a specific craft or trade and not being very good at like all of them.
What about a skill that's new to your lifetime but is familiar to your soul?
Each time you come into the life, it's a new skill for you, because you got to start back over again and train it up. So each time your character has a skill level that's below the expert level, you'll get that 20% bonus as long as you are Naren in that current lifetime. They definitely will have different combat styles, and I think one of the fun things about Chronicles of Elyria, and specifically the way we're doing the combat style, is to be the most effective in kind of the martial arts, is you're going to need to travel and learn those military styles and combat styles, not necessarily because you want to learn them yourself, but because you need to be familiar with them. And because it's a reflex skill-based game, you need to know what kind of attacks your opponent are going to be throwing at you so you know what to defend against. So the most learned combatants are going to be the ones who do spend some time in each of the tribes learning their different techniques. If you read the Weird write-up, you notice I said that the Weird typically use small, like short-handed weapons and thrown weapons. And they do that because when you're moving around inside of caves and caverns, there's not necessarily a lot of room for like long swords and stuff like that. So they tend to use weapons that are close to their body and are more like short-range weapons. So
they're also a lot easier to conceal.
They are a lot easier to conceal, which if you're trying to assassinate someone is nice. So Serpentius actually had brought in previous some of his weapon collection. This is a weapon that I think is akin to what you would expect to find on the Weird. So if you're taking a look at that, that's great. Over here we have something that might be, while the Teresk are not as militant, that might be something more like what the Teresk would have. It's reminiscent of like an alligator tooth. It's more decorative. They probably have encrusted gems on it and stuff like that, because their weapons are often as much for show as they are for actual use. But that gives you something of an idea of what the Teresk might use. Settlements are not necessarily like universally tribal. Specifically with the Naren, Naren will exist in almost all environments and all kind of settlements throughout the region. That being said, they tend to not go into the more deep tropical areas, so you'll find less Naren inside, for example, the Genoa environments. But it's entirely possible to see Naren inside of the Broodveer regions, or seeing even some Naren living inside of the semi-arid desert with the Weird. Or even in the wetlands. So, and that's true of not just the Naren, it's true of everybody. That's almost entirely determined by biome. We talked about this, I think, in a previous Q&A. The tribes themselves don't have a specific affinity towards technology. Necessity is the mother of invention, and nothing drives necessity more than the environment that they live in. So whether we're talking about boat making and shipwrights for the Teresk, or we're talking about agricultural stuff for the Naren, or various ways to dig and tunnel for either the Rothi or the Weird, it's all going to be driven by the environment that the different tribes are in. My vision of the Genoa have always been swinging on tree branches, being able to jump across them, being able to swing on vines. And this is something that we would not only have in the short term, but long term, if we have, for example, ship-to-ship combat, being able to swing from one ship to the other or something like that. That being said, that's not true of the Kipik, for example, who focus mostly on things like ziplining and ladders. So it does vary. The reason for this is, first of all, that type of movement in parkour speaks to the high adventure that I really imagined for this game, but it also makes the tropical rainforest a very unique biome, because it comes with almost an entirely different system of navigation. You're not moving around on flat platforms, you're not moving around on the ground, you're having to jump from branch to branch and swinging and stuff like that.
But the canopy in a broadleaf forest versus the canopy in a jungle are pretty different.
Way different.
So while leaping from, or even just walking across two intersecting tree branches in the canopy of a jungle is a lot more likely than being able to do the same sort of thing in the broadleaf forest. So the Kipik would probably want to build more contraptions, more zip lines and things for them to be able to go from
hanging bridges.
Yeah, from tree to tree without having to touch the ground, while the Genoa may have more natural paths in the trees.
Each of the advantages and disadvantages that we've talked about either come about due through bloodlines or through cultural things. The things that are cultural typically depend upon what culture you were raised in. So if you are raised in a specific culture, you'll have those advantages. If you're not, you will not. And so as people procreate and have children, they opt which kind of culture the child will be raised in, and that's kind of how they pass those on. For things that are bloodline based, those typically work off of a genetic system. Each kind of one of these traits have a floating point value, a scale value between nothing and 100%. And as people start to procreate, it will blend those values across and begin to dilute them. So in general, the more pure a specific tribe is, or a specific bloodline, the more impact you gain towards the survival in that biome, and as you start to procreate and intermingle with the other tribes, you tend to get some advantages and disadvantages of both, but never as strong as you would have had you been consistent in your breeding strategy. The gossip and reputation systems are mechanical systems that allow you to pass information. It's also used inside the justice system. So, for example, if you're among the Teresk and you're overseeing like a tribunal or not a military, but a kind of a legal court case, and somebody tries to present false information, then you as the judge would know that, and it would be very difficult to mislead you. No.
No way.
They're bound by their physics.
They're bound by the physicality.
But they could be pretty, you could get a pretty buff.
You could say that the strongest Kipik could be stronger than maybe the weakest of the brood
That's
bear,
what I was thinking.
but not the strongest. And that has nothing to do with any kind of hard cap. It has to do with diminishing returns. As your character becomes stronger and stronger and stronger, the amount of effort and work it takes to get even stronger gets higher and higher. And that ramp for the broodveer is flatter, whereas for the Kipik it's much steeper. And so while they can work extra hard to become stronger than, let's say, the other Kipik, and potentially stronger than an Aaron or something like that, they would have to work impossibly hard in order to become broodveer strong or Yoru strong. So
impossible is the key word.
Impossibly hard. So no, you will never be a Kipik stronger than a broodveer.
Right. But like between the Naren and the Weird, which have the same body size,
Right.
like they're
Right.
roughly
Their physique is
equivalent.
fairly similar.
Right.
Yeah.
Could an Naren be as strong as the strongest Weird? Yes.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yes, we have the ability to do that. Yes, we will be paying attention to that during playtesting and based on feedback, and we will be adjusting the strengths and weaknesses and advantages and disadvantages of the tribes.
Right.
We do want there to be a roughly equal proportion of all of them. Now, that being said, there are some tribes that we feel like are going to have a higher distribution of players in general, like the Naren, for example. They have the largest biome. They tend to be the most neutral. We expect to see more Naren than we do some of the other tribes. On the other hand, the Genoa, the broodveer, and even the Weird and the Teresk, because they're kind of more abstract and high level in their design, we expect to see fewer of them than, let's say, the Naren or the Kipik. But that being said, if we do see a disproportionate number beyond what we would consider a safe normal distribution, then we will be going in and tweaking those to make sure that they are all desirable. We do want each of the tribes to be equally desirable to a degree. The reality is that they will generally have their own structure, their own form of leadership, and will not automatically join you. They have their own personalities, just like any other NPC. They do. If you've been reading the write-up, we talk about the different types of music, the different instruments they have, how and why they use the music. As to how we decide what that is, some of it's cultural. It's based on the type of instruments that are going to be available to them in their biome, and then a lot of it is just working with our composer to figure out what's an appropriate theme for the tribe and kind of what kind of music that they would listen to. There's not going to be what we would consider modern or contemporary music, but it will be varying forms of classical or older music. Most of the mechanics where we say these are the value of the people, in a lot of cases there are implicit contracts in place. So being a member of that society, being a part of that settlement means that you're implicitly bound by that culture to do certain things. So violating that is like breaking the law. And so if you do that, the NPCs will interact negatively to you, you'll become taboo, and if it is actually breaking the law for one reason or another, then they will arrest you and take you to trial for that. That being said, if you are careful enough and don't get caught, that's something else. And also, as they say, the only excuse for bad manners is fast reflexes. So if they can't catch you, that's something else as well. But that's true of any tribe. You know, any of the tribes that we're providing information, when we talk about cultural significance and the things that the tribe do and do not like, in most cases that means that the NPCs will interact with you differently if you violate that, and that there are implicit contracts in place. It also could mean that, for example, because it's a violation of implicit contract, that you would get flagged by other players as well. So even if the NPCs aren't around, other players can go, okay, now I have the ability to take and arrest you and bring you in because you violated something that's a cultural law.
Well, for one, carry it on you, because people can't take stuff off of you. Two, it's only within the settlement.
Right.
And so an outsider or even a weird from another settlement is not going to be able to come into your house and take all your stuff. Only somebody from your own town would have access in this way. And so it's not just anyone. It's not like some outsider stumbles into your secret cave base and then takes all of your stuff.
Right.
Because they're not a weird. They don't get that.
Right. The weird, actually, like we talked about earlier, are a fairly sophisticated social structure, in the sense that the people who play the weird have to do so with the understanding that there is a larger objective to playing the weird than collecting stuff. It's people who, through the use of espionage and disguises and spycraft, are subtly pulling the strings of the other kingdoms and domains and settlements. And so
To serve the twofold queen.
Yeah, I mean, to serve the twofold queen. So they all basically dress the same. They all wear the same kind of general drab garb. They all use basically the same single forged equipment. They all, develop a lot of the same skills and trade crafts. So they don't really have a lot of reason to steal from one another, because they all basically have the same stuff to begin with. They're not a hoarding tribe. They're just as likely to give the stuff away to another tribe in exchange for information as they are to use that themselves. So you kind of have to approach the weird not from the perspective of how do I protect my stuff, but more from the what stuff would I care about protecting that the other members of my tribe settlement would want access to that I wouldn't be willing to give them.
If you're a person, though, who is worried about people taking stuff from you, I would not recommend playing the weird.
Yeah.
Right. Like all things in Chronicles of Elyria, there is always the choice. In this case, it just means that they would be violating the edicts. There is an implicit contract for their culture and religion that they will not fight on a pitched battlefield, which is a system. That is a mechanic where people are able to declare war, and it creates a battle zone, and the weird cannot fight on those pitched battlefields. Their battle happens before and afterwards, which personally, I love the idea that they will start wars and they will end wars, but they will not participate in wars. That is just amazing. Or at least they have their own war. It's the war that you don't see. So they're
on a different level.
They're on a different level. They just don't come on the battlefield. That doesn't mean that they absolutely cannot. No. But it does violate an implicit law. So if they are found going onto the battlefield and witnessed by other members of the weird, then they would have to answer for their actions, whatever that particular law is. And again, those laws are controlled to a degree by the kings, counts, and dukes. So it may be that you're a member of a duchy within the weird who are less strict on that and have actually relaxed the requirements on that to some degree, or even a count. So there is all flexibility. Remember, guys, this is true of all the different tribes. We're giving you a framework which we feel adds interesting elements of conflict. The tribes are all about conflict and differences of opinion and different perspectives and different religions. But ultimately, what we can establish is only the history and the cultures of the tribes at the moment in which you guys get into the world. And it is absolutely our idea that we give you guys the opportunity to mold and shape the future of the world so that each server is different and unique. And so even weird amongst two different servers will not necessarily end up with the same implicit contracts and implicit laws as the owners or kind of the rulers and leaders of those individual servers feel more or less comfortable with the different requirements. And so we absolutely assume that some of these are going to change over time. Some of them may change immediately, and that's ultimately up to the leaders. So thank you guys for joining us again for another live Q&A of Chronicles of Elyria, this time part 3 talking about the tribes, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you. Bye.